listening to Allman in the Morning, Common Sense Radio.
Cause you're a sky full of stars. I'm gonna give you my heart.
Good morning, you bunch of drunks.
Cause you're a sky.
So, I don't know about these
full of stars.
new reading glasses I have. I look like a 65-year-old woman from Webster Groves.
Wait, and you picked them out, right?
Look
Yeah.
over here. We just got to get a little bit of a...
They're green-rimmed glasses. Hold on, let me just make sure I'm okay before you take my picture.
They look blue from here. They're
They're
green?
not blue.
Okay.
You're colorblind.
No, you're just far away. It's
I can't
dark.
see you
It's
anyway.
dark over here. I'm sitting in the dark.
I finally had to get reading glasses because I do have some at home too, but I just had to get these, and I can't see anymore, and Aiden can't be with me at all hours of the day because he's normally my reader on labels and things like that.
I got a good picture of you.
All throughout DC, I'm like, Aiden, what does this say? Aiden, what does this say? Or I'm looking at the phone, looking at directions. Like, I can't see the highway, on the map quest or map thing, whatever it is, on the GPS thing. Like, what does that say? Henry Davis is on. I got to get to Chris Wallace but Henry Davis is going to goof. Hey, Henry, call back tomorrow, buddy. Let's do this bit. Henry Davis is our brand new awesome buddy there, out there in the hinterlands. And you know who else is our buddy? Yeah, Chris Wallace. He's our buddy. We're buddies. We're news buddies. Hey, Chris Wallace, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Fine.
You weren't here last week.
No, I was actually in D.C. I was right in your neighborhood.
I have to tell you, Stacy, it was such a pleasant, it was such a sensible, it was a very, very good conversation.
Well, I'm going to blow that out of the water. I'm going to ruin all that stuff with you now.
I suspect.
I'll fix that. So, where were you, for instance, like during the inauguration? Were you actually on the scene, or were you watching it, or what do you guys do how does Chris Wallace?
Well, our coverage, if you had watched it, was from the media tent, the media center, down the mall between the inaugural stand and the Washington Monument, which is why when President Trump said that the crowd stretched all the way to the Washington Monument, it wasn't even close because we were probably 200 yards, I don't know. I mean, quite a distance closer to the inaugural stand, and there weren't any people within 100 or 200 yards of us. So, I mean, this is one of the dumbest conversations or arguments that folks have ever had about the size of the inaugural crowd. Who cares? But the fact is, it didn't stretch all the way back to the Washington Monument. It wasn't even close.
Well, yeah, that's interesting because I was I was literally 200 feet away from the podium for where President Trump took the oath of office. And when I looked down, I guess visually I could see just a sea of people. But there is one picture out there that's interesting, and I don't know where it came from, but it shows that obviously it stops before the monument. But then it also shows that there aren't any people among the trees and everything else. But I could see from where I was, it was packed. So I don't know what time that picture was taken, but I'm not quite sure it really matters either.
I can tell you something. I am sure. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Who cares? I mean, do you remember the size of the crowd for Lincoln or FDR?
Yes, I do, as a matter of fact.
No, you don't. And
no, I don't.
The point is, did that have anything to do with their effectiveness as a president? No, it didn't. I mean, this is one of the things that I think, and look, I actually think he's had a pretty good week, President Trump has, in terms of laying out an agenda and keeping campaign promises and all of that. But he does sometimes trip all over himself, and the only person who seems to care about this is him, and I just think he lives in a world of ratings and numbers and deals and the size of deals, and it doesn't matter. Nobody cares how big the crowd is except him.
Well, so now what came first though? Because I think there's this idea somehow that the crowd statement from the Trump administration just came out of the blue, but apparently it was a reaction to other reports out there, I don't know where they were, about the crowd size comparison. So who brought it up first?
Well, I don't know, but he's the president.
Right.
He doesn't have to, I mean, there are going to be people out there, who, particularly now when they see that he's so sensitive about these things, who are going to troll him just to get under his skin. So why not just ignore it and focus on the important stuff? This was my first question to Reince Priebus on Sunday, and I think it's a good way to. I would hope that the president, not that he needs advice from me, would follow this. He said in his inaugural address, I think it was the key line, every decision we make will be based on how it benefits the American family. That's a pretty good marker for a president. I promise you, the American family doesn't care what the size of the crowd was, and he just shouldn't get off into these wild goose these dead ends.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, too. I had mentioned earlier, if there was an issue with the crowd size, some of it might have had to do with the fact that a lot of people were scared to be in D.C. If you read anything on the internet before you went, you were being told that people were going to be roaming the streets, throat punching Trump supporters and everything else. So I'm wondering whether, and not only that, hotel rooms were $600, $700 a night, and it just was, it was hard to actually make that trip. I'm just saying. If we're going to make an issue,
can we talk about anything?
Well, you brought it up, not me.
I'll talk about the Super Bowl. I'll talk about what I had for breakfast. Let's not talk about crowd size anymore.
Well, you brought it up, not me. I was going to talk to you about something else.
Well, in any case, you said where were you? But anyway.
Well,
all I can tell you is all right. You're not getting me into it. Let's go on.
Okay, no problem. It was exciting, though. I have to tell you.
It's very. Look, is that your first inauguration?
Yes.
It's very exciting. I mean, that's the thing that and my first inauguration was Jimmy Carter, and I was just there as a spectator because my folks were able to get good tickets back in 1977. And it is whether you like the person who's president or not. Although I will say it's better if you like the person who's president. It's always exciting because it doesn't happen most places, and there's sort of a wonderful grandeur at noon to see the old president there. And, and I got to give Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton high marks. That was the last place in the world they wanted to be, but they showed up because that's what former presidents do. And it's like, as they say, what the whole point of it is supposed to be, this isn't a world championship, that our election is an intramural scrimmage, that we're all on the same side. And, one side wins and one side loses, but there's a lot more that unites us than divides us.
I was there with my 12-year-old son, and it was the
he
first.
Must have been thrilled.
It was the first time he'd ever been to D.C., and I have to tell you, Chris, Washington D.C. is majestic. I mean, I love going there, and it was the first time I'd ever been to Arlington, for instance. So we went there and saw.
Did you go to the Tomb of the Unknown?
Yes, we saw the change of the guard there.
Unbelievable, and the way they walk, and the precise number of steps they take, and then the clicking of the heels. It's interesting. I did a power player the week before last with Tom Barrack, who's was the chairman of the Presidential Inaugural Committee, another billionaire, very close friend of Donald Trump's, and a genuinely nice man. And he said that was one of the things that the president wanted. Is he just, his feeling was, I don't need fancy parades. I don't need. There's a grandeur to Washington, to the monuments, to the setting, and let that be what people remember, not some fancy float or something like that.
Right. And we took a cab out to Mount Vernon, which was fantastic. And so we just kind of made the whirlwind tour. We didn't go into the museums because there was a lot of tumult down there on the street on Saturday due to the demonstration. So we didn't really wander down there. But it was really amazing. And I did, now that you brought up the monuments, I did tell Aiden, my son, because, when you do go to Washington, D.C., you do see a lot of memorials, a lot of buildings, a lot of this, a lot of that. I told him, the reason why these are there is because we always want to make sure we remember the actual people behind them. These edifices and these monuments and these buildings and this concrete, they represent more than just objects. They represent people who have made this country what it is today. And we had just a wonderful experience. I love Washington, D.C. And you know what? The people in Washington, D.C. are awesome.
Thank you.
Well, there's still this air of Southern hospitality, believe it or not, when you go into some of the operations in D.C., restaurants or whatever. And I thought it was outstanding. We stayed at the Churchill Hotel. You know where that is? It's right across from where Ronald Reagan was shot, that Hilton Hotel.
Oh, yes. No, I know exactly where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, honestly, it's had a bunch of names over the years. The Churchill, yeah, that's a very nice neighborhood.
And I did something kind of crazy because I took Aiden down to, you'll never forget, and I know you won't either, that stone wall where President Reagan was shot. Right now, there's
I know exactly where it is.
Yeah. So what I did was, and I hope this isn't weird, but I looked on YouTube for the actual video of the shooting, and Aiden and I stood there, and I showed him the video while we were standing there. Is that weird?
Well, that's not weird.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's a little weird.
Well, I just wanted to take him there because, it just was such an eye-opening experience. And boy, that whole vision, is just amazing. And it was right across from the General McClellan statue. And so we went down to a place called McClellan's Retreat. If you ever go bar hopping, that's a good little bar there.
Okay.
Just want to let you know.
Did Aiden, did you get him a brewski?
He had a Coke and I had a gin martini.
Okay. No, it sounds like you guys had a great time. It is a wonderful experience, and I know that because we have to cover it. It made it look like the streets were awash in protesters and burning cars and all of that stuff. In fact, it was really very peaceful, very pleasant. The only thing that was frankly unpleasant for a native Washingtonian was how hard it was to get along. I mean, there were so many barriers. And just like getting to work on inauguration morning, having to go through about 4 different levels of barriers, and,
right,
and then walking for a long period of time, it was a pain in the neck, but that's what you got to do to make sure that you keep things safe. The interesting thing, and I don't know, you probably know this, but prior to Ronald Reagan in 1981, the inauguration was not on the west front; it was on the east front, on the other side of the Capitol, which basically overlooks the congressional parking lot.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know why it was that way, but that's the way it always was. And it was just in 81, and it wasn't because of Reagan, because this was a decision that was made before he was elected. They moved it out to the much more natural place, which is to put it facing out towards the mall, which in effect creates a kind of natural amphitheater. And, it was just the perfect venue. And you say to yourself, well, why were people so stupid for so long and putting it on the other side? But I think part of it may have been because for a long time they didn't have these huge crowds. I think it used to be a relatively small event in terms of the number of people who showed up.
I was trying to imagine what it must be like for a president newly taking the oath to be giving a speech and looking out and seeing the Washington Monument right down in their sight. It must be just such a powerful experience for
I have to say,
someone.
And, I was watching it on TV. There were, I've known Donald Trump a while, and I've interviewed him a number of times, and he's a pretty self-confident man. He looked, as he was getting ready to walk out there, a couple of times, even he looked a little overwhelmed, like, oh, boy. This is more than I bargained for. But once he got out and did the oath of office and gave his speech, he was back to Donald Trump.
Right on. I saw the same thing when he walked up when the Obamas were greeting them. I noticed he was. I think that he, as confident as you point out, as confident and successful as he is, I think even this was the one time where I think he was just didn't kind of know everything. He wasn't absolutely in control, which is fine because I wouldn't know what to do either.
If you're not overwhelmed by something like that, at least for a moment, there's something wrong with you.
Right.
Then you don't have the humility that you should have, and that's what a lot of presidents afterwards say is that. About that is it creates a sense not of, oh, man, I'm great, I won. It's more a sense of humility like, wow, this is a big responsibility, and I'm now have the to protect the country and 300 million Americans.
Yeah, I thought his speech was similar to that, in which I think it was almost like he handed over the inauguration speech to the people. I liked it. I know people criticized it, but I thought it was great. All right, I guess I got to ask you for sure what's going on with this Sunday. What are you thinking about? You probably
we don't know for sure. I mean, we're not quite booked. We think we'll have the top official. We've done really well. Last week we had an exclusive interview with Reince Priebus the week before, an interview with then Vice President-elect Pence. So we're seeing that, and then we think we're probably going to get a top Democrat. One of the keys is, and this is going to be an interesting question as to whether Trump can bend Washington to his will, or whether Washington will, to some degree, bend the president to its will. But he's got an awfully ambitious agenda. Not saying it's good or bad, just saying it's a lot. And, he's just three things: infrastructure, tax reform. Well, four things: infrastructure, tax reform, the wall, and Obamacare. And then he's got a bunch of other stuff. I don't know that he can get that done in a year. That's a lot of stuff. And then he's got a Supreme Court nominee. If he were able to get even half of that done in his first year, he would be an enormously successful president. So it'll be interesting to see, and that's one of the things we'll be talking about, what their plans are from the Trump side, and then from the Democrat side, what they think the reality is in terms of how they'll be able to get through it. A lot of these things, like the wall, he's going to need Democratic votes, because it's going to cost at least $10 billion, and there's a question as to where's he going to get the money to do that.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm sure it's at a point now where, regarding your show, it's like, man, you have like 20 things to choose from to focus on as a topic. But let me just say real quickly. So on Saturday, I had prepared the show. I had gone home. We could have Reince Priebus on. I got home, and then he gives his speech at the CIA and says all the things he says, and that becomes highly controversial. Right.
And I'm like, darn, now I'm going to have to rewrite all my questions. And then I'm almost done with that, and suddenly Sean Spicer comes out around 5 o'clock and chews out the press, and I'm like, darn, now I got to do it all over again. I mean, covering this guy is like trying to drink water out of a fire hose. There's always so much stuff.
I love it. The great analogy, too. All right, Chris, well, we'll be tuning in there, Fox News Sunday, and as always, we appreciate you, friend.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right, at Fox News Sunday.